The next speaker brings in a slightly different element to the discussion, although some of the startups have been bringing this up. Vincent Ling, who's a senior director at Takeda, one of our member companies. As you know, the ILP program caters to life science as well as to all industries, and many pharmaceuticals are members. Vincent is one of them. And he's here to address why we care about new materials specifically. So we're bringing in this material angle, and I think you'll see why that's relevant. Vincent?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, great. So why we care about materials. My name is Vincent Ling, Takeda. My background is actually in biologics and drug discovery. I've been doing that for 27 years or so. More recently, I joined Takeda, and I felt that there should be a more nuanced approach to drug discovery. Maybe the world isn't all about drug discovery. So what I mean by this, right? If you take a look at the pharma industry, I'm glad someone introduced the idea of Moore's Law this morning, because I'd like you to take a look at a Nature publication a while back, and they called it Eroms Law, right? And basically, what you see here is the number of drugs you can make for $1 billion. And in the 50s, it was about 20 or 30. And now it's about 0.3, right? And it's decreasing in a log scale. This is a catastrophe that's looming in the pharma business. Right? A lot of people don't like to talk about this, but this could eat us alive. And of course, the ramification is that pharma is the ones who make the drug. You have to buy, you have to have a good ecosystem from the pharma in order to access the biotechs, which the startups feed into, right? All this is very natural. We need to address this. This is very important. And people say, why is this happening, right? And another thing too is, if you look at this, it looks very daunting, right? But the interesting thing about this is it's down to about $2.8 billion to invent a drug now, to get it out to market from inception, right? But there's, believe it or not, looking at this, there is a silver lining to this cloud, right? First, it's a log scale on the side, so it can't go to 0. So you can look forward to that, okay? All right, so why is this happening? Why is the pharma industry in trouble, right? Well, basically, you can't get things through the clinical trials in any accelerated fashion. So if you take a look at phase 1, 2, and 3, in the past 20 years, right, the rates of success through each phase of clinical trial has remained basically unchanged. On the right panel is just overall success rate, hovers around 10%. Now, okay, you guys say, add technology. Okay, well, I lived through the genomic revolution. I was there when Celera had the database. I was one of the few people who used the data to try to do data mining and find different sequences of interest. You say, okay, proteomics, okay, well, that's included in here. And none of these have impacted the success in clinic. So even though you can add technology, it's not being reflected in clinical success. Now, the latest rage is personalized medicine. See if we can use some biomarkers and increase the success rate. Unless we can get through this, it doesn't matter what you invent upstream. Okay, it's great to have innovation, but let's try to break the cycle and think in terms of application. All right, now, okay, well, how do you create new applications for medical therapy? So the idea is when you have innovation, a lot of people talk about adding time and resources, and you get this traditional S-curve. And if you think about it, right, the S-curve can be like for PCs. You put in money and time, and you get an output back. And then on the other hand, when you come in with a disruptive innovation like an iPhone, you can break this. And basically, the new phase of growth is in the new technology. Okay. The FDA doesn't allow this to happen. The pharma industry doesn't work this way. You can't come in with an inferior technology, right, and pass clinical trials because you're competing yourself against industry standard, right? So if your standard of care is better than what you're doing, you die. As a startup, you will never make this, right? And so as a result, the pharma industry, they go for a different approach. They look for orthogonal discovery space, right? You want to go to an area where people aren't. That's why there's a focus on rare diseases and unmet needs. And the unmet needs left these days that are billion-dollar blockbusters are very hard, like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, very difficult neurological things. And rare diseases, of course, because there are so few patients to work on. And so you see the entire industry philosophically heading toward that direction. Okay. Now, there's another approach. When you think in terms of a market, addressable market, and maybe a different way of thinking about it. On the top left is a drug-coated stent, and on the right it's a pacemaker, and on the bottom is Takeda's Lupron Depot. The one thing they have all in common is they're all medical devices, all right? Another thing they have in common is that they're billion-dollar blockbusters, right? So for example, Lupron Depot has nothing to do with drug discovery, right? They used a generic drug, okay, and they encased it inside microparticles that release. And what happens is that this is a billion yen, so 120 billion yen is about $1 billion. In the last 20 years or so, it's made $1 billion in sales for Takeda, which I think is really, really remarkable. And there's no end in sight, right? It's a highly engineered product. So engineering with materials can actually create billion-dollar drugs. Now, the question is, can we do this continuously? Well, there's a problem, because pharmas, they bank their thinking on drug discovery. Medical devices think in terms of mechanisms and engineering, right? And sometimes they don't get together. One side is afraid of the other. But I think we should really consider merging the two. And so our Materials and Innovation Group, we're looking for areas of research that are aligned with our therapeutic areas, GI, oncology, CNS, and vaccines. And what we would like to do is to fund research that gets to preclinical proof of concept. In other words, cure a mouse, right? And we're into localized medical therapy. So I like reducing systemic exposure. I like dosing closer to the lesion, and also seed stage projects. If you're looking for like $20 million, then I'll point you to business development. If you have a molecule for that could be the next drug, I'll point you to one of the therapeutic areas. But if you have something that's kind of materials-based, kind of like biologics-based, that go together, I think I would be very interested in that. All right. And so how do you work with our partners? Since we're only starting up our group now, I'm interested in talking to any and all of you who are interested. So we work with both academics and company. And so, of course, with the academics, there are kind of licensing agreements or sponsored research agreements. With companies, we start with, if they're a small company, we start with a feasibility study. And we go from there, and that can lead to angel investments or collaborative research. And the best case scenario, and as a hint for all of you, what works the best is if we have a Takeda FTE involved. In other words, one of our employees actually working on your project, either at your site or in our laboratories, which I'm building as we speak. And the idea behind this is that most, not to say anything bad, because I ran a CRO for a while, most publications in the scientific literature cannot be reproduced in biology, about 70% non-reproducible. And it's no one's fault. I mean, it works in the investigator's lab, it doesn't work anywhere else on the planet, right? And we have to identify those things and create systems that are robust. Because you can quite imagine what would happen if a research investigator in a university setting comes up with incredible results, but then you bring it into the company and all of a sudden, it doesn't work. I mean, it's eggs on everybody's faces, and that's not a good way to go. That is completely avoided if we're working on it simultaneously with you in your lab, if you're an academic investigator. And that works out really well. So these are the type of ways we prefer to work with small companies and academics. Now, one example, and we talked about, and we had a press release about this not too long ago. Last month, we entered into collaboration with Biosurfaces. And Matt Faneuf is here in Biosurfaces. Raise your hand, Matt, if you want to talk to him afterwards. And basically, they make electrospun membranes. They're a small company in Ashland. And they have IP around tissue grafts and drug delivery and cell chambers using electrospun materials. Now, I won't get into the chemistry of electrospun materials. That's a well-known system of materials that's been around for about 15, 20 years. However, Biosurfaces had unique applications, and that's the key word here. They had applications for this that we're very interested in. So we entered into a feasibility studies, and we had like 3 studies, and the studies were conducted both in their labs, outsourced labs, and also in our labs in Japan. And they all dovetailed and showed the same thing. And based on that, we had a research collaboration with them for 3 years to develop a number of products for us. And it's all in the R&D stage, but we think that, with the number of things we try, maybe one of them can become clinical in a not too distant future. And so here's the article in Life Science Leader. If you go into my LinkedIn, if you want to LinkedIn, I'll LinkedIn with you. There's a link there that will go to the article and also in Fierce Biotech that came out about a month ago. And so this is the idea. Is there a middle ground? Not quite drug discovery, not quite material science, something in the middle where it's the best of both worlds. And I think that would be an interesting thing to explore with all of you. Okay, thank you.
We have time for a super quick question, if there is a question. Otherwise, and in the meantime, I'll let you know that one of the ways we work with companies like Takeda is that, apart from introducing them, obviously, to opportunities like this or individually to companies, we are hosting a MIT Startup Showcase in Japan, or co-hosting it with Takeda. So that's one of the ways that we can collaborate with companies, especially for events outside of this very campus where MIT has a lot of ample facilities and don't have so much need for a co-host. But for any other location, especially if it's an innovation hub, we partner with companies that are members of our program. If there is no further immediate question, we're going to save it for the panel debate. I have plenty of questions for Vincent.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.